To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, welcome and thank you. Your presence makes these stories worth sharing. We'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, The Foundation. Derek Morrison had built his empire from nothing. At 42, he owned 3 successful auto repair shops across the city, employed 37 people, and commanded respect wherever he went. His hands, permanently stained with motor oil despite the expensive soaps, were the hands of a man who understood machinery, loyalty, and the intricate workings of trust. Those same hands now trembled slightly as he stared at the wedding photo on his office desk. Lisa's radiant smile seemed to mock him from behind the glass. 15 years of marriage, and he'd believed every word, every kiss, every promise. Derek's journey to success hadn't been conventional. Orphaned at 16 when his parents died in a car accident, he'd learned early that the world owed him nothing. He'd slept in his first auto shop for 3 months, showering at the YMCA, eating nothing but bologna sandwiches until his first major contract came through. Every scar on his knuckles told a story of 18-hour days, of building something permanent in a world that had taught him everything was temporary. When he met Lisa Brennan at a community college automotive course 12 years ago, she'd been different. While other women seemed intimidated by his intensity, his unwavering focus on building something lasting, Lisa had encouraged it. She'd bring him coffee during late nights at the shop, help with paperwork, even learn basic bookkeeping to assist with the business. "You're going to own this whole city one day," she'd whispered during those early mornings when they'd work side by side, her presence the only softness in his steel-hardened world. They'd married after 2 years of dating, and Emma had arrived 3 years later. Derek had poured everything into being the father he'd never had, the husband he'd promised to be. He'd bought them the house on Maple Street, the one with the white picket fence Lisa had circled in real estate magazines. He'd worked 16-hour days to afford private school for Emma, family vacations to places he'd only dreamed of as a kid. But success had brought distance. As the business grew, Derek spent more time at the shops, expanding, hiring, building. Lisa had complained, gently at first, then with increasing frustration about his absence from family dinners, missed school plays, forgotten anniversaries. "You're building an empire, Derek," she'd said 6 months ago, her voice carrying an edge he'd never heard before. "But what good is an empire if you're ruling it alone?" He'd promised to cut back, to hire more managers, to be more present. But old habits died hard, and the third shop's grand opening had consumed the last 2 months of his life. Derek's phone buzzed. A text from his foreman, Bobby. "Boss, you coming in today? That transmission job is giving the boys trouble." Derek looked around his home office. Lisa had left for grocery shopping an hour ago, taking longer than usual lately. Emma was upstairs in her room, probably reading. The domestic tranquility he'd worked so hard to provide felt suddenly fragile. He grabbed his keys and headed downstairs. "Emma," he called. "Daddy's going to the shop for a couple hours. Tell Mom when she gets back." No response. Derek climbed the stairs and knocked on Emma's door. "Sweetheart, come in, Daddy." Emma sat cross-legged on her bed, surrounded by books. At 7, she was already reading at a 5th-grade level, her intelligence as sharp as her father's business acumen. She had Derek's dark eyes and Lisa's golden hair, a perfect blend of both parents. "I need to check on something at work," Derek said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Will you tell Mom?" Emma nodded, but something flickered across her face. Fear. Derek's protective instincts, honed by years of looking out for himself, immediately sharpened. "Everything okay, Princess?" "Daddy," Emma said quietly, "do you love Mommy?" The question hit Derek like a punch to the solar plexus. "Of course I do. Why would you ask that?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Sometimes people leave. Like what happened to you when you were little." Derek pulled her into his arms, his heart breaking. He'd told Emma about his parents' death, wanting her to understand why family was so important to him, why he worked so hard to keep them safe and secure. "Hey," he whispered, stroking her hair. "I'm never leaving you. Ever. And Mommy and I love each other very much. We're a family, Emma. Forever." But as he held his daughter, Derek noticed something that would haunt him for weeks to come. On Emma's nightstand, barely visible beneath a children's book, was a piece of paper with handwriting he didn't recognize. Male handwriting. And at the bottom, he could make out 2 words, "Love, Trevor." Derek's blood chilled. Who the hell was Trevor? Chapter 2. The Discovery. Derek Morrison wasn't a man who jumped to conclusions. 15 years in business had taught him to gather facts before making decisions. But the name Trevor echoed in his mind for 3 days like a death knell. He began paying attention to details he'd previously overlooked. Lisa's phone, once carelessly left on counters, now stayed glued to her side. She'd started wearing perfume to the grocery store. New clothes appeared in her closet. Clothes she claimed were old things she'd found in the back. On Thursday evening, Derek decided to test his suspicions. "I got tickets to that new action movie," he announced during dinner. "The one you've been wanting to see." Lisa barely looked up from her salad. "Oh, I can't this weekend. I promised Jennifer I'd help her with the charity auction planning." Jennifer, Lisa's supposed best friend from the PDA. Derek made a mental note to call Jennifer's husband. "What about next weekend?" Derek pressed. "Maybe. I'll have to check my schedule." Schedule. When had Lisa needed a schedule for anything beyond Emma's school events? That night, after Lisa fell asleep, Derek carefully extracted her phone from the nightstand. His hands moved with the same precision they used to diagnose engine problems, systematically working through her security. Lisa had changed her passcode, something she'd never done in their entire marriage. But Derek remembered the time she'd left her phone on his desk at the shop, unlocked. He'd seen her enter the code, Emma's birthday. He tried it. Nothing. He tried their anniversary. Nothing. Finally, he tried his own birthday, the one date Lisa had never forgotten, even during their worst fights. The phone unlocked. What Derek found made his blood run cold. Months of text messages, photos, plans, an entire secret life laid out in digital evidence that would have made any prosecutor weep with joy. Trevor Hayes, 35 years old, a pharmaceutical sales rep who traveled through their city every few weeks. The messages dated back 8 months, starting innocent enough. Compliments on Lisa's volunteer work at the hospital fundraiser where they'd apparently met. But they'd escalated quickly. "Can't stop thinking about yesterday afternoon." Trevor had written 3 weeks ago. Lisa's response: "Derek's working late again. Emma's at soccer practice until 6. Derek scrolled through what felt like hundreds of messages, each one a knife twist in his gut. They'd met in hotel rooms. In Trevor's car. Once, Derek realized with growing fury, in his own house, in his own bed, while he'd been at the shop dealing with the emergency repair. The final messages, from yesterday, made Derek's hands clench into fists. "Trevor, when are you going to tell him?" "Lisa, soon. I can't keep living this lie. Emma's starting to notice." "Trevor, my divorce will be final next month. We can start fresh. New city, new life." "Lisa, I know. I love you too. Just need to figure out the best way to handle Derek. He's not going to make this easy." "Trevor, let me worry about Derek. Guys like him are all bark, no bite." Derek stared at that last message until the words burned into his retinas. All bark, no bite. Trevor Hayes had no idea who he was dealing with. Derek screenshotted every message, every photo, every piece of evidence. Then he carefully placed the phone back exactly where he'd found it and lay in the darkness, his mind racing. He thought about Emma's question, "Do you love Mommy?" His daughter had known. Somehow, she'd sensed the fractures in their family before he had. Derek had survived abandonment before. He'd clawed his way up from nothing when the system had failed him. But this betrayal cut deeper than anything he'd experienced. This wasn't just about him. It was about Emma. About the family he'd built. The stability he'd promised his daughter would never be taken from her. By morning, Derek had made his decision. Lisa and Trevor wanted to start fresh. He'd give them exactly what they wanted. But it would be on his terms, in his time, and they would pay a price they'd never forget. Derek Morrison didn't forgive, and he sure as hell didn't forget. The war had begun. Chapter 3. The Gathering Storm. Friday morning arrived with deceptive normalcy. Derek made Emma's breakfast, kissed Lisa goodbye as she left for her errands, and headed to his main shop with the weight of terrible knowledge settling in his chest like concrete. His first stop was Jimmy Patterson's office. Jimmy had been Derek's lawyer since the beginning, handling everything from business contracts to the purchase of their house. More importantly, Jimmy was Derek's closest friend, one of the few people who knew the full story of Derek's rise from orphan teenager to successful businessman. "You look like hell," Jimmy said, gesturing for Derek to sit in the leather chair across from his desk. Jimmy's office reflected 30 years of successful practice. mahogany furniture, law books, and framed photos of him with various city officials. Derek pulled out printed copies of the text messages. "I need you to look at these." Jimmy's expression grew increasingly grim as he read. Finally, he looked up, his face grave. "Derek, I'm sorry. This is comprehensive evidence of adultery. In this state, it'll definitely factor into custody and asset division." "That's not why I'm here." Jimmy leaned back in his chair. "Then what do you need?" "Everything you can find on Trevor Hayes. Employment history, financial records, criminal background, divorce proceedings. Everything." "Derek." "Legal information, Jimmy. Public records. I'm not asking you to do anything unethical." Jimmy studied his friend's face. They'd known each other for 8 years, and he'd never seen Derek look so coldly determined. "What are you planning?" "I'm planning to protect my daughter and my assets." "Lisa wants out?" "Fine. But she doesn't get to destroy Emma's stability and take half of everything I built while doing it." After leaving Jimmy's office, Derek drove to the second part of his plan, Bobby Torino's apartment. Bobby had worked for Derek for 5 years, but their relationship went deeper than employer-employee. Bobby was a 40-year-old ex-military man who'd struggled with civilian life until Derek had given him a chance. More importantly, Bobby had connections throughout the city, connections that proved useful when Derek needed information or favors that existed in the gray areas of legality. Bobby's apartment reflected his military background: sparse, clean, functional. He opened the door wearing grease-stained coveralls, having just returned from the early shift. "Boss? Everything okay?" Derek handed him a piece of paper with Trevor Hayes' license plate number, which he'd obtained from Lisa's phone photos. "I need surveillance on this guy. Where he goes, who he sees, his patterns. Professional level." Bobby glanced at the paper, then at Derek's face. He'd seen that expression before, during the time Derek had systematically destroyed a competitor who tried to muscle in on his territory through intimidation and sabotage. "How deep we going with this?" "Deep enough to know everything about his life." "But Bobby," Derek's voice carried a warning edge, "nothing illegal. Nothing that traces back to us. Clean as fresh snow. Consider it done." This related to the family situation. Derek's surprise must have shown on his face, because Bobby continued. "Boss, Lisa's been asking weird questions at the shop. About your schedule, your travel plans. And Emma." Bobby's voice softened. "Kid seems scared lately. I may not be the sharpest tool in the shed, but I notice things." "What kind of questions was Lisa asking?" "When you'd be late, which days you usually worked past 7. Seemed like she was mapping out your routine." Bobby's expression hardened. "Want me to dig into her activities too?" "No, I've got that covered." Derek's phone buzzed. A text from Lisa. "Working late at the charity thing tonight. Don't wait up." Derek showed the message to Bobby. "It's Friday night." "What charity auction planning happens on Friday night?" "The kind that involves hotel rooms," Bobby said grimly. Derek felt the familiar cold calculation settling over him. "Bobby, change of plans. I want full surveillance on both of them tonight. Everything." That evening, Derek picked up Emma from her friend's house and brought her home for what he knew would be one of their last normal nights for a while. They ordered pizza, watched her favorite Disney movie, and Derek tucked her into bed with extra care. "Daddy," Emma said as he turned off her light, "can I ask you something?" "Always, princess. If something bad happened, would you keep me safe?" Derek knelt beside her bed, his heart aching. "Emma, I would move mountains to keep you safe. Whatever happens, you will always be protected. Promise me you'll remember that." She nodded solemnly, and Derek realized his 7-year-old daughter understood more about their family's situation than he'd given her credit for. At 11 p.m., Derek's phone rang. Bobby's voice was grim. "Boss, you need to see this. I'm sending photos now." The images that arrived showed Lisa and Trevor entering the downtown Marriott, then leaving 3 hours later. But what caught Derek's attention wasn't the affair, it was the third person in the photos. A woman, blonde, well-dressed, entering the hotel separately but clearly coordinating with Trevor. Bobby's next message explained everything. Ran the plates on her car. Trevor's wife, Michelle Hayes. "She's not just divorcing him, boss. They're working together." Derek stared at the photos as the full scope of the betrayal became clear. This wasn't just an affair. Lisa and Trevor weren't star-crossed lovers caught up in passion. They were running a con, and Derek had been marked as the target. His phone buzzed with another message from Bobby. "Gets worse. Found out Trevor's got gambling debts. Big ones. And his wife? She's a bankruptcy attorney. Derek set his phone down and walked to his home office. He opened his safe and pulled out the business documents, property deeds, and financial records that represented 26 years of building something from nothing. Lisa wanted to take half of everything. Trevor thought Derek was all bark and no bite. They were about to discover that Derek Morrison wasn't just a successful businessman. He was a survivor who'd learned long ago that in this world, you either predator or prey. And Derek had never been anybody's prey. Chapter 4. The Trap. Saturday morning brought an unexpected gift. Derek woke to find a voicemail from Dr. Patricia Hendricks, Emma's pediatrician, requesting he call about Emma's recent checkup. When Derek returned the call, Dr. Hendricks's news chilled him to the bone. Mr. Morrison, Emma mentioned during her appointment that she's been having trouble sleeping. She seems unusually anxious for a child her age. She also mentioned some interesting things about changes at home. What kind of things? She said Mommy has been having secret meetings and that she's scared something bad is going to happen. Now, children often misinterpret adult situations, but given Emma's intelligence level, I thought you should know. Derek thanked Dr. Hendricks and immediately called his lawyer. Jimmy, I need you to document Emma's medical records. Everything. And I want a custody evaluation requested immediately. Derek, that'll tip your hand. No, it won't. I'm a concerned father whose daughter is showing signs of anxiety. Lisa can't object without looking like she doesn't care about Emma's well-being. That afternoon, Derek implemented the next phase of his plan. He called Lisa, knowing she was at Trevor's hotel. Hey, babe, he said, injecting warmth into his voice. I was thinking we should take a family vacation. Just the three of us. Maybe that cabin in Colorado you've always wanted to visit. Lisa's voice carried a strange tension. Oh, that sounds nice. But I've got a lot of commitments the next few weeks. What about the weekend after next? I can clear my schedule. Let me think about it, okay? Derek smiled grimly. Of course. Take your time. After hanging up, Derek called Bobby. They took the bait. She's going to have to either cancel her plans with Trevor or come up with an excuse. Either way, she's going to make a mistake. Bobby's surveillance had been comprehensive. Trevor Hayes wasn't just a pharmaceutical sales rep with gambling debts. He was a professional con artist who'd been married 4 times, each marriage ending with the husband mysteriously losing significant assets. Michelle Hayes wasn't his wife. She was his partner in crime, playing the role of the bitter ex-wife to create sympathy and urgency. Boss, Bobby's voice crackled through the phone. I found something else. Trevor's been casing your business. Got photos of him sitting outside the main shop 3 times this week, taking pictures. Derek's blood ran cold. Pictures of what? The building, the security system, the employee schedules. And get this, he's been asking questions around town about your insurance policies. The pieces fell into place with terrifying clarity. This wasn't just about stealing Derek's wife and half his assets. They were planning something bigger. Something that would destroy everything Derek had built. Derek spent Sunday implementing security measures. He installed new cameras at all 3 shops, changed the alarm codes, and instructed Bobby to vary the employees' schedules. He also made a visit to his insurance agent, ostensibly to increase coverage, but really to document any suspicious inquiries about his policies. Monday morning brought vindication. Derek's insurance agent called with disturbing news. Mr. Morrison, someone called last week claiming to be from your accounting firm, asking about your policy details. When I called your accountant to verify, he said he'd never made such a request. Derek felt the familiar cold calculation settling over him. They weren't just stealing his family. They were setting him up for complete destruction. That evening, Lisa made her fatal mistake. Derek, she said during dinner, I think we should postpone that vacation. Emma's been having problems at school, and I think we should focus on that. Derek looked at Emma, who was quietly eating her pasta. Emma, are you having problems at school? Emma shook her head, confused. No, Daddy. Mrs. Peterson said I'm doing really well. Lisa's face flushed. I meant potential problems. Her anxiety issues. What anxiety issues? Derek asked quietly. The ones Dr. Hendricks mentioned. Derek hadn't told Lisa about Dr. Hendricks's call. There was only one way she could have known about it. She'd been monitoring his phone calls, probably through some app Trevor had helped her install. I think you're right about the vacation, Derek said calmly. Family should come first. That night, Derek called Jimmy. I need you to file for custody tomorrow morning. Emergency petition. Cite the medical records and request immediate temporary custody pending a full evaluation. Derek, are you sure about this timing? Jimmy, they're not just planning to take half my assets. They're planning to destroy my business, probably through insurance fraud or worse. Emma's in danger as long as she's in this house. Tuesday morning, Derek put his plan into motion. He arrived at the courthouse early, filing the custody petition and providing evidence of Emma's anxiety, Lisa's suspicious behavior, and his concerns for his daughter's safety. Meanwhile, Bobby was executing surveillance protocol, tracking both Lisa and Trevor's movements throughout the day. At 3 p.m., Derek received the call he'd been waiting for. Boss, Bobby's voice was urgent. They're moving faster than we thought. Trevor just met with 2 guys I recognize from my army days. Bad news guys. The kind who do demolition work for people who can't use legitimate contractors. Derek's hands gripped the steering wheel of his truck. Where's Emma? Still at school? But Lisa just called the school to say she's picking Emma up early for a family emergency. Derek floored the accelerator toward Emma's school, his mind racing. They'd figured out he was onto them, and now they were accelerating their timeline. Whatever they had planned for his business was about to happen, and they needed Emma out of the way. His phone rang. Lisa's number. Derek, there's been an emergency at Emma's school. I'm going to pick her up and take her to my mother's house for a few days. Lisa's mother had been dead for 3 years. I'll meet you at the school, Derek said calmly. No need, Lisa said quickly. I've got it handled. Focus on work. Derek hung up and called the school directly. This is Derek Morrison. Under no circumstances is anyone except me authorized to pick up Emma today. If my wife shows up, call the police immediately. Then Derek made the call that would change everything. Bobby, it's time. Execute the nuclear option. Chapter 5, The Revelation. Derek's nuclear option wasn't what Bobby expected. Instead of confrontation or violence, Derek had spent months quietly building an unassailable legal fortress around his assets and his daughter. What Bobby didn't know was that Derek had been suspicious of Lisa's behavior for longer than he'd admitted. The text messages had confirmed his fears, but they hadn't been his first clue. Derek Morrison hadn't survived orphanhood and built a business empire by ignoring his instincts. Bobby, I need you to deliver 3 packages, Derek said, his voice carrying the calm authority that had made him successful. First package goes to Detective Sarah Walsh at the police station. Second goes to the FBI field office downtown. Third goes to Channel 7 News. Boss, what's in the packages? Evidence. Financial records showing Trevor's con game history. Bank records showing unusual deposits in Lisa's account that correlate with his previous victims. And surveillance footage from the past 2 weeks. Bobby's voice carried new respect. How long have you been planning this? Since the night I found the messages. I called in every favor, used every connection, and hired the best investigators money could buy. Trevor Hayes isn't his real name. It's Thomas Vernon, and he's wanted in 3 states for insurance fraud. Derek's phone buzzed with a text from Detective Walsh. Got your package. We've been tracking Vernon for 18 months. Can you come in immediately? But Derek had one more stop to make first. Emma's school sat quiet in the afternoon sun as Derek pulled into the parking lot. His daughter waited in the principal's office, her small face etched with confusion and fear. Daddy. Emma ran into his arms as he entered the office. Princess, we need to talk about something very important, Derek said, kneeling to her eye level. Do you remember what I told you about always being safe? Emma nodded solemnly. Well, Mommy has been making some very bad choices lately. She's been lying to both of us, and she's been planning to hurt our family. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I know, Daddy. I heard her talking on the phone. She said mean things about you. Derek's heart shattered. What kind of mean things? She said you were. She used bad words. And she said once you were dealt with, she and Trevor could have all your money. Derek pulled Emma closer, his fury carefully controlled for his daughter's sake. Emma, I need you to stay with Uncle Jimmy for a few days while Daddy fixes this situation. Can you do that for me? Emma nodded. Are you going to be okay? Derek stood, lifting his daughter in his arms. Princess, bad people sometimes think they can hurt good people because they believe good people won't fight back. But sometimes, good people are just better at fighting than bad people realize. 30 minutes later, Derek sat in Detective Walsh's office, surrounded by evidence that painted a picture of a sophisticated con operation. Trevor Vernon had been targeting successful small business owners for 5 years, always working with a female accomplice who would seduce the mark while Trevor gathered intelligence. The pattern is always the same, Detective Walsh explained. The woman gains access to financial information, insurance policies, business schedules. Then they create a crisis, usually a fire or explosion at the business, that destroys evidence while providing an insurance payout they can manipulate. How do they manipulate the insurance? The female accomplice claims emotional trauma, demands a quick settlement. Meanwhile, Vernon disappears with whatever liquid assets they've managed to transfer. By the time anyone realizes what happened, they're in another state, starting over. Derek studied the photos of Trevor's previous victims. What happened to the women? Detective Walsh's expression darkened. Two committed suicide when they realized they'd been used. One disappeared entirely. We think Vernon eliminates loose ends. The room went silent as the implications sank in. Lisa wasn't just betraying Derek. She was in mortal danger from her supposed lover. Derek's phone rang. Lisa's number. Put it on speaker, Detective Walsh instructed. Derek. Lisa's voice carried a tremor of panic. Where are you? I went to the school to get Emma, and they said you'd already picked her up. Emma's safe, Derek said calmly. The question is, are you? Silence. Then, what's that supposed to mean? It means Trevor Vernon, or Thomas, or whatever his real name is this week, isn't planning to run away with you, Lisa. He's planning to eliminate you as soon as you've served your purpose. Another silence. Then Lisa's voice, smaller now. I don't know what you're talking about. Lisa, listen to me very carefully. Your life is in danger. Trevor isn't who you think he is. He's a con artist who's done this before, and his previous accomplices are either dead or missing. You're lying, but her voice lacked conviction. Detective Walsh leaned toward the phone. Mrs. Morrison, this is Detective Sarah Walsh with the Metro Police. We have evidence that the man you know as Trevor Hayes is actually Thomas Vernon, wanted in connection with multiple fraud cases and suspected in the disappearance of 3 women. The line went quiet for so long Derek thought Lisa had hung up. Finally, her voice came through, barely a whisper. Oh God, what have I done? Where are you, Lisa? Derek asked. The Marriott. Room 412. Derek, I'm scared. Trevor left an hour ago, and he took my car keys. He said he had to tie up loose ends before we could leave town. Detective Walsh was already radioing for backup. Mrs. Morrison, lock the door and don't open it for anyone except police officers. We're sending units now. Derek stood to leave, but Detective Walsh stopped him. Where are you going? To make sure my wife doesn't die for being stupid. Derek, you need to let us handle this. Derek turned, his eyes carrying the cold determination that had built his empire from nothing. Detective Trevor Vernon made 2 mistakes. He threatened my daughter's stability, and he underestimated what happens when you corner a man who's already lost everything once. Derek, I'm not going to hurt him, Detective. I'm going to save him. Because if he's harmed one hair on my wife's head, what I would do to him would make whatever legal punishment he's facing look like a vacation. As Derek left the police station, his phone buzzed with a text from Bobby. Boss, we've got a problem. Trevor just showed up at your main shop with 2 guys and a van full of equipment. They're not here for repairs. Derek smiled grimly as he started his truck. Trevor Vernon was about to learn the difference between targeting victims and targeting survivors. The war was about to become a slaughter. Chapter 6, The Hunt. Derek arrived at his main shop to find Bobby and 4 other employees waiting in the parking lot, their faces grim with purpose. These weren't just mechanics. They were Derek's inner circle. Men who'd been with him for years, who understood loyalty and understood what happened to people who threatened their livelihood. Talk to me, Bobby, Derek said, stepping out of his truck. 3 men, including Vernon. They cut the locks on the back entrance about 20 minutes ago. I called the boys together before calling you. Figured you'd want to handle this personally. Derek looked at the building that represented everything he'd built. Through the windows, he could see shadows moving inside, methodical and purposeful. What's the plan, boss? Asked Miguel Santos, Derek's head mechanic and a man who'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan before finding stability in Derek's shop. Derek pulled out his phone and called Detective Walsh. Detective, Trevor Vernon is currently breaking into my business with 2 accomplices. I'm here with my employees, and we're going in. Derek, no. Wait for backup. Detective, these men have explosives. Every minute we wait increases the chance they'll destroy everything my employees depend on for their livelihoods. We're going in. Derek hung up before Detective Walsh could respond. He turned to his men, seeing the same determination in their faces that had built this business. Nobody gets hurt, Derek said firmly. We're not vigilantes. We're businessmen protecting our livelihood. Miguel, you and Tommy circle around back. Bobby, you and Frank take the east side. I'm going through the front. Boss, Bobby's voice carried concern. What if they're armed? Derek smiled grimly. Bobby, I've been carrying since the day I opened this place. And unlike Trevor Vernon, I actually know how to use it. Derek approached the front entrance of his shop with the calm focus that had carried him through every crisis in his life. The building he'd bought 8 years ago had been a wreck, requiring complete renovation. Derek had done most of the work himself, learning every inch of the structure, every weakness, every advantage. He unlocked the front door silently and stepped into the lobby. Voices carried from the main work bay, urgent and frustrated. The safe's not where the plans showed. A voice Derek didn't recognize was saying. Plans change, Trevor's voice responded. Find the financial records. The insurance policies. Everything. Derek moved through his own building like a ghost, using the knowledge of every creak in the floorboards, every blind spot in the layout. He reached the office overlooking the main bay and peered through the window. Trevor Vernon and 2 men in coveralls were systematically ransacking the work bay, looking for something specific. One man held what appeared to be an explosive device, small but sophisticated. Derek's phone vibrated with a text from Bobby. In position. Waiting for your signal. Derek typed back. On my count. 3, 2, 1. Derek flipped on the main work bay lights and stepped into view. Gentlemen, I believe you're looking for me. Trevor spun around, his face shifting through surprise, fear, and finally settling on desperate bravado. Derek, you're supposed to be at the police station. Was at the police station, Derek said conversationally, walking down the stairs to the main floor. Interesting conversation with Detective Walsh about your real name, your real history, and what happened to your previous partners. One of Trevor's accomplices reached for something in his jacket, but froze when Bobby and Frank appeared from the east entrance, followed immediately by Miguel and Tommy from the rear. Guns on the ground, Miguel said calmly, his military training evident in his stance and voice. Hands where we can see them. But Derek's attention was focused entirely on Trevor. You know what's funny, Thomas Vernon? You spent months studying me, learning my patterns, my weaknesses. But you missed the most important thing about me. What's that? Trevor asked, his voice shaky. I'm not a victim. I never have been, and I never will be. Derek's phone rang. Detective Walsh. Derek, are you? Everything's under control, Detective. 3 suspects in custody. Bomb Squad will want to look at an explosive device they brought with them. Bomb Squad is already en route. Derek, about your wife. Derek's blood chilled. What about her? She's safe. But we found something in her hotel room. Documents, financial records, insurance policies, all yours. And a life insurance policy on you that we can't account for. Derek stared at Trevor, understanding flooding through him. How long, Trevor? How long has Lisa been planning this? Trevor's face twisted with what might have been genuine emotion. You want the truth? She contacted me, Derek. 8 months ago. She found my contact information through a mutual friend, someone who'd heard about my services. Making inconvenient husbands disappear. The affair was just cover. The real plan was to make you disappear permanently after you'd updated your life insurance policy. Derek felt the world shift around him. She planned to have me killed? The explosion at your business was supposed to happen with you inside. Tragic accident, grieving widow, insurance payout, and I disappear forever. Bobby moved closer to Derek, sensing his boss's emotional state. Boss, cops are here. Police sirens wailed outside as Derek processed the full scope of his wife's betrayal. Not just adultery, not just theft, attempted murder. Trevor, Derek said quietly, you said Lisa contacted you. But you also said your previous partners either committed suicide or disappeared. Did Lisa know about that? Trevor's silence was answer enough. Derek pulled out his phone and called Detective Walsh. Detective, I need to know exactly where my wife is right now. She's in protective custody. What? Because Trevor Vernon just told me she initiated this entire plan. She didn't just help him, she hired him. And if she hired him to kill me, What do you think she hired him to do to her once I was dead? The line went quiet. Then Detective Walsh's voice, grim. We're bringing her in for questioning immediately. As police flooded into his shop, Derek realized the full genius of Lisa's plan. She would have grieved her dead husband, collected his life insurance, claimed his business assets as his widow, and then disappeared forever with Trevor. Except Trevor had never planned to let her live long enough to enjoy the money. Derek's phone buzzed with a text from Jimmy. Emergency custody hearing granted. Emma's legally yours until this is resolved. Looking around his shop, the building that represented everything he'd built from nothing, Derek felt a strange sense of peace. He'd protected his daughter, saved his business, and exposed the truth. But as he watched Trevor Vernon being led away in handcuffs, Derek realized the most devastating part of this betrayal wasn't what Lisa had done to him. It was what she'd done to Emma. His 7-year-old daughter would grow up knowing her mother had tried to have her father killed. Derek Morrison had survived orphanhood, poverty, and betrayal. But he wasn't sure how to help his daughter survive this. The war was over, but the healing had only just begun. Chapter 7. The Judgment. The interrogation room at Metro Police Headquarters felt smaller than Derek expected as he sat across from Detective Walsh and FBI agent Patricia Coleman. Through the one-way glass, Derek could see into the adjacent room where Lisa sat in handcuffs, her face streaked with tears and mascara. Mr. Morrison, Agent Coleman began. We need to understand the timeline of your wife's involvement with Thomas Vernon. Derek slid a folder across the table. Everything's in there. Financial records showing payments from Lisa to Vernon dating back 10 months. Email communications between Lisa and Michelle Kramer, Vernon's real partner, discussing my business assets and insurance policies. And recordings. Detective Walsh looked up sharply. Recordings? I've been recording every conversation I've had with Lisa for the past 3 weeks, including the one where she discussed the best time to stage the explosion at my shop. Derek's phone contained hours of recorded conversations, carefully archived and backed up. His suspicions had run deeper than he'd admitted to anyone, and his preparation had been exhaustive. Agent Coleman reviewed the documents with growing amazement. Mr. Morrison, this is the most comprehensive case file we've seen in a domestic conspiracy case. You documented everything. I learned a long time ago that trust without verification is just wishful thinking. Through the glass, Derek watched Lisa being questioned by another FBI agent. Her story was falling apart under scrutiny, contradictions emerging as the agents pressed her for details. Derek, Detective Walsh leaned forward. There's something else we need to discuss. The life insurance policy on you. Lisa increased it to $2 million 6 months ago. She forged your signature on the application. Derek nodded. I know. I discovered it last week when I called to verify my coverage. That's when I knew this was bigger than just an affair. Why didn't you report it immediately? Derek's smile was cold. Because I wanted to catch everyone involved. Lisa, Vernon, Michelle Kramer, and whoever else was part of this network. If I'd reported it immediately, they would have scattered, and other families would have been targeted. Agent Coleman studied Derek with new respect. You used yourself as bait. I used myself as a trap. There's a difference. The interrogation continued for 3 hours, with Derek providing evidence that painted a picture of Lisa's transformation from unfaithful wife to would-be murderer. The timeline showed careful planning, coordination with known criminals, and premeditation that elevated the charges from conspiracy to attempted murder. Mr. Morrison, Agent Coleman said finally, your wife is going to prison for a very long time. How do you plan to explain this to your daughter? Derek stood, gathering his documents. Agent Coleman, my daughter already knows her mother betrayed our family. What she's going to learn is that actions have consequences, and that her father will always protect her from people who would hurt her, even if one of those people is her mother. Derek left the police station as the sun set over the city he'd called home for 26 years. His phone contained 17 missed calls from reporters, 12 from business associates, and 1 from Dr. Hendricks, Emma's pediatrician. He returned Dr. Hendricks' call first. Mr. Morrison, I've been following the news reports. How is Emma handling this? She's with my lawyer's family tonight. I'm picking her up in the morning. Doctor, I need to know, how do I help her through this? Dr. Hendricks' voice was gentle but firm. Derek, children are more resilient than we give them credit for. Emma's going to need honesty, stability, and the knowledge that her world is secure despite her mother's actions. The fact that you protected her throughout this will mean everything to her. Derek's next call was to Bobby. How are the shops? All secure, boss. News vans are outside the main location, but business is actually up. Turns out people respect a man who protects what's his. And the employees? Proud to work for you, Derek. Miguel's been telling everyone that they work for a man who doesn't just talk about loyalty, he proves it. Derek's final call was to Jimmy. How's Emma? She's okay, Derek. Worried about you, but okay. She asked if her mother was going to jail. What did you tell her? I told her that when people make bad choices, they have to face the consequences, and that her father made sure she would always be safe. Derek hung up and drove through the city, past the 3 shops that represented his life's work, past the house on Maple Street that he'd bought for a family that no longer existed, and finally to Jimmy's suburban home where his daughter waited. Emma ran to him as he walked through the front door, her small arms wrapping around his waist with desperate intensity. Daddy, are you okay? The news said bad men try to hurt you. Derek knelt and looked into his daughter's eyes that held his own determination and intelligence. Emma, I want you to listen to me very carefully. The bad men are in jail now. They can't hurt us anymore. And Mommy made very bad choices that hurt our family. Is she going to jail too? Derek nodded. Yes, Princess. For a very long time. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steady. Daddy, do you still love her? Derek considered the question carefully. Emma, I love the person I thought your mother was. But that person was pretending. The real person was someone who would have hurt both of us very badly. Are you going to be sad? Derek pulled his daughter close. I'm going to be sad that our family isn't what I thought it was. But I'm going to be happy every single day that you're safe, that you're with me, and that we're going to build a new life together. Just us, Princess. And it's going to be better than what we had before, because it's going to be real. That night, Derek tucked Emma into the guest bed at Jimmy's house and sat in the living room, processing the end of his marriage and the beginning of his new life as a single father. Jimmy brought him a beer and sat down across from him. Derek, the media is calling you a hero. Local businessman exposes murder plot, saves own life. How does that feel? Derek took a long drink of his beer. Jimmy, I'm not a hero. I'm a survivor who got lucky and had good friends. What happens now? Derek looked toward the hallway where Emma slept peacefully for the first time in months. Now I raise my daughter to be stronger than both her parents combined. I run my business. I live my life. And I never, ever trust anyone enough to let them get close enough to destroy me again. Derek, not everyone is like Lisa. Derek's smile was cold and final. Jimmy, Lisa was my wife for 12 years. If I couldn't trust her, I can't trust anyone. Emma and I will be fine on our own. As Derek sat in the darkness, he realized that Thomas Vernon had been wrong about one thing. Derek Morrison wasn't all bark and no bite. He was something much more dangerous. He was a man who'd learned that the only person you can truly trust is yourself, and the only protection that matters is the protection you build with your own hands. The war was over. Derek had won. But the victory felt hollow, because in saving his life and his daughter's future, he'd lost the last piece of his heart that believed in love, trust, and family. From now on, it would be Derek and Emma against the world. And Derek Morrison had proven he was very, very good at winning. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. 3 months after the trial, Derek Morrison sat in his office overlooking the main shop floor, reviewing financial reports that showed his business had grown by 30% since the news broke about his wife's murder plot. Clients respected a man who'd outsmarted professional killers, and word of mouth had brought in customers from 3 neighboring cities. Emma sat at the small desk Derek had installed in his office, working on her homework. At 8 years old now, she'd grown more serious, more observant, but also more confident in her father's ability to protect her from anything. Daddy, Emma said without looking up from her math worksheet. Mrs. Patterson from school asked if I miss Mommy. Derek set down his reports. This conversation had been inevitable, and he'd prepared for it. What did you tell her? I told her I missed the Mommy I thought I had, but not the real Mommy. Derek's heart ached at his daughter's wisdom. Emma, that's probably the smartest thing anyone could say about it. Daddy, will you ever get married again? Derek considered lying, giving Emma the hopeful answer a child might want. But their relationship was built on honesty now, and he wouldn't start lying to her. No, princess. I won't. Because you don't trust anyone? Because the only person I need to love, and who needs my love, is sitting right here doing her math homework. Emma smiled, the first truly happy smile Derek had seen from her since the ordeal began. Good. I like it being just us. Derek's phone buzzed with a text from Detective Walsh. Sentencing hearing today. Thought you'd want to know. Derek had chosen not to attend Lisa's sentencing. The outcome was predetermined. 25 years to life for conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and racketeering. Thomas Vernon had received life without parole. Michelle Kramer had turned state's evidence and received 15 years. But Derek had submitted a victim impact statement that he'd read to Emma before sending it to the court. Your Honor, the defendant didn't just betray my marriage or steal my assets. She stole my daughter's sense of security, her belief that mothers protect their children, and her ability to trust that the people who claim to love her actually mean it. The defendant created a world where my 8-year-old daughter has to worry about whether people who say they love her are telling the truth. No prison sentence can repair that damage. Derek's phone rang. Jimmy Patterson's number. Derek, I just left the courthouse. Lisa got 25 to life. No possibility of parole for 15 years. Good. Derek, she asked to see Emma. She wanted to apologize. Derek's voice went ice cold. And what did you tell them? I told them that my client's daughter is a minor who has already suffered enough trauma from the defendant's actions, and that any contact would be harmful to the child's psychological well-being. Jimmy, Lisa lost the right to be Emma's mother the day she decided to have me killed. If she contacts us in any way, letters, phone calls, messages through third parties, I want restraining orders filed immediately. Already prepared. Derek, there's something else. Lisa's parents want visitation rights with Emma. Derek stood, his fury barely controlled. Lisa's parents knew she was having problems in our marriage and never said anything. They're not getting access to my daughter. They're threatening to sue for grandparents' rights. Derek smiled grimly. Let them try. I have financial resources they can't match, and every court in the state knows what their daughter tried to do to me. They'll lose, and they'll lose publicly. After hanging up, Derek looked at Emma, who'd stopped pretending to do homework and was clearly listening to his conversation. Princess, do you want to see Grandma and Grandpa Brennan? Emma shook her head firmly. They were mean to you before, and they never visited me unless Mommy made them. Derek nodded. Emma's assessment was accurate. Lisa's parents had never approved of Derek's working-class background and had made their feelings clear throughout his marriage to their daughter. Emma, I want you to understand something. From now on, it's going to be you and me making decisions about our family. Not judges, not lawyers, not grandparents who suddenly care about you. Just us. Forever. Forever. That evening, Derek received an unexpected visitor. Bobby knocked on the door of the house on Maple Street, holding a manila envelope. Boss, this came to the shop today. Figured you'd want to see it immediately. The envelope contained a letter from Michelle Kramer, postmarked from federal prison. Mr. Morrison, I know you have no reason to believe anything I tell you, but I need you to know that your wife was the most ruthless person I've ever worked with. Thomas thought he was running the con, but Lisa was manipulating all of us. She found us. She planned everything, and she would have killed all of us once she had your money. You saved more lives than just your own. I hope you and your daughter can find peace. M. Kramer. Derek read the letter twice, then handed it to Bobby. What do you think? Bobby scanned the letter and shook his head. Boss, I think you married a sociopath who was better at hiding it than most. Derek walked to his fireplace and threw the letter into the flames. Bobby, I don't care if Lisa was evil or just stupid. The result was the same. She betrayed our family and tried to have me killed. Her motivations don't matter anymore. What about Emma? She's going to have questions as she gets older. Derek watched the letter burn to ash. Emma's going to know that her father protected her from people who would have hurt her, including her mother. She's going to know that family isn't about blood, it's about loyalty, trust, and keeping each other safe. And if Emma wants to know more about her mother when she's older? Derek turned from the fireplace, his expression final. Then I'll tell her the truth. That her mother was a woman who chose money over family, strangers over her husband, and murder over marriage. And that some choices are so evil, they can never be forgiven or forgotten. As Bobby left, Derek realized that the house on Maple Street, the house he'd bought for the perfect family, felt empty and haunted by memories of a life that had been built on lies. Derek made a decision that would define the rest of his and Emma's life. "Emma," he called upstairs. "Pack your things. We're moving." "Where are we going, Daddy?" Derek smiled as he looked around the house that represented everything he'd thought he wanted. "Somewhere new, Princess. Somewhere that's just ours." 3 days later, Derek Morrison and his daughter moved into a modern apartment above his main shop. Emma had her own room, a play area that overlooked the work bays, and a father who would never again be far from her side. Derek had learned the most important lesson of his life. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford, and love was a weakness his enemies would exploit. But protecting Emma? That was neither luxury nor weakness. That was purpose. And Derek Morrison had always been very, very good at achieving his purposes. Chapter 9. The New Beginning. 5 years after the trial, Derek Morrison stood on the observation deck of his fourth auto shop, watching Emma work on a rebuilt engine in the bay below. At 13, she'd inherited his mechanical aptitude and his unwavering focus. But she'd also developed something Derek had lost years ago, the ability to find joy in simple accomplishments. "Dad," Emma called up to him, her voice bright with excitement. "The carburetor rebuild worked. Come see." Derek smiled as he headed downstairs. Emma had grown into a remarkable young woman, intelligent, self-reliant, and completely uninterested in the typical teenage concerns that dominated her classmates' lives. She preferred spending afternoons at the shop to shopping at malls, and she could diagnose engine problems better than mechanics with 20 years' experience. "Nice work, Princess," Derek said, examining her meticulous rebuild. "What's next?" "Bobby's teaching me about transmissions this weekend, and Mrs. Chun wants me to help with her car's electrical system." Mrs. Chun was Derek's accountant, a sharp woman in her 60s who'd become something of a surrogate grandmother to Emma. Unlike Lisa's parents, who'd eventually given up their legal challenges and disappeared from their lives entirely, Mrs. Chun earned Emma's trust and affection through consistency and genuine care. Derek's phone buzzed with a text from Jimmy Patterson. "Derek, you need to call me. It's about Lisa." Derek stepped away from Emma and called his lawyer immediately. "Jimmy, what's going on?" "Derek, Lisa died yesterday. Prison fight. Thought you should know before Emma hears it somewhere else." Derek felt nothing. No sadness, no closure, no satisfaction. Lisa had become irrelevant to his life years ago. "How do I tell Emma?" "Honestly, the way you've handled everything else." That evening, Derek sat with Emma in their apartment's living room. Their home above the shop had become exactly what Derek had envisioned, a fortress of stability where father and daughter could build their lives without outside interference. "Emma, I need to tell you something about your mother." Emma looked up from her engineering textbook. She was already taking advanced courses through the local community college. "She's dead, isn't she?" Derek stared at his daughter in surprise. "How did you know?" "Dad, I've been checking prison records online for 2 years. I knew she was in solitary confinement. I knew she was having problems with other inmates. I figured it was only a matter of time." Derek realized he'd underestimated his daughter's intelligence and curiosity. "How do you feel about it?" Emma considered the question with the same analytical approach she brought to mechanical problems. "I feel sad for the little girl I used to be, who thought she had a mother who loved her. But I don't feel anything for the woman who tried to have you killed." "Emma, it's okay to have complicated feelings." "Dad," Emma interrupted, "I've had 5 years to think about this. Mom made her choice. You made yours. I'm glad you chose to protect me instead of protecting her feelings or trying to keep the family together like some of my friends' parents do." Derek pulled his daughter close, marveling at her wisdom and strength. "I love you, Princess. I love you too, Dad. And I'm proud that you're nothing like her." Later that week, Derek received another unexpected visitor. Detective Walsh, now retired, stopped by the shop on a Friday afternoon. "Derek, I wanted to talk to you about something. I've been consulting on cases involving domestic conspiracy, and your case keeps coming up as a reference point." "How so?" "The way you documented everything, the way you protected your daughter while gathering evidence. It's become a textbook example of how victims can take control of their situation instead of waiting for the system to protect them." Derek nodded. "The system failed me once when my parents died. I wasn't going to let it fail Emma. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. Would you consider consulting on cases like yours? Helping other people who are being targeted by family members or romantic partners?" Derek looked through the office window at Emma, who was explaining hydraulic principles to one of his newest mechanics. "Detective, I have everything I need right here. My business, my daughter, my peace of mind. I'm not interested in getting involved in other people's problems. Derek, you could save lives. I already saved the only life that matters to me." Detective Walsh left disappointed, but Derek felt no guilt about his decision. He'd learned that the world was full of predators and victims, and his only responsibility was ensuring that Emma never became either. That evening, Derek and Emma sat on the roof of their building, looking out over the city that had been their home for Derek's entire adult life. "Dad, Mrs. Chun asked me something weird today," Emma said. "What's that?" "She asked if I ever wanted brothers or sisters." Derek's chest tightened. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that families aren't about how many people are in them. They're about the people who actually love and protect each other." Derek smiled. "That's exactly right. Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always. Do you ever regret that it's just us?" Derek looked at his daughter, brilliant, strong, unafraid, and completely his. "Emma, I regret a lot of things. I regret that your mother wasn't the person I thought she was. I regret that you had to learn so young that people can lie about loving you. I regret that you'll probably always be more careful with your heart than other kids your age. But I have never, not for 1 second, regretted that it's just us. You're the best thing I've ever accomplished, Princess. Everything else is just background noise." Emma leaned against her father's shoulder as they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. "Dad, I'm glad Mom showed us who she really was before it was too late." "Why?" "Because now we know that what we have is real. Nobody's pretending, nobody's lying, nobody's planning to hurt us. It's just us, and we're enough." Derek Morrison realized in that moment that he'd achieved something he'd never expected after Lisa's betrayal: contentment. Not happiness, that required trust and vulnerability he'd never risk again, but contentment, built on certainty, protection, and the love of the one person whose loyalty he never questioned. Emma would graduate high school in 3 years. She'd already been accepted to engineering programs at several universities. Derek would support whatever path she chose, knowing that he'd raised her to be strong enough to handle anything the world could throw at her. And if she chose to stay close to home, to help run the business that had supported their family through everything, even better. Derek Morrison had started with nothing, lost everything once, and rebuilt his life into something unbreakable. He'd protected what mattered most, eliminated threats before they could strike, and created a legacy that would outlast any marriage, any betrayal, any attempt to destroy what he'd built. The war was over. Derek had won, and this time, the victory would last forever. As father and daughter sat on their roof, watching their city settle into evening, Derek realized that sometimes the greatest triumph isn't getting everything you want. Sometimes it's discovering that what you have left after losing everything is enough. Derek Morrison was enough. Emma Morrison was enough. And together, they were unstoppable. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.